Hey, this is Tiger. Welcome to my stream. The game tends to take even longer than before, so I have to use the intro to do my own intro. Hey AJ, thank you for moderating my stream again. Nice to see you on the chat. We are going back to Germany today and are talking about some signaling rules that we encounter in German signaling across the board. Yes, already noticed. Again, no disclaimer this week, so hear it from me. We are talking about playing a computer game, so please leave the real world trains and railway installations alone and to the professionals. What I wanted to do today is to talk about one thing that happens on German signals a lot: little white lights, two white lights, or only one flashing or non-flashing. And I wanted to make a stream to look at this in context and well, discuss what it is good for to have a flashing white light and not flashing white light, two of them. And CD Radar says coconuts have water in them. This is debatable, isn't it? Isn't it milk what they have inside of them? Theodoros, hey, great to see you. Nice that you made it to the stream. And Spectre, great to have you on the stream, guys. So, what I meant to do actually is to divide up the services that we are playing in this stream a bit and start with one of the scenarios that come with the Vectron in Nahverkehr Dresden. Nahverkehr Dresden scenarios, I think, and it is the Ballast Boogie scenario that I wanted to play, because this is the only one that I remember that has, in the end, a Ersatzsignal Zs1 on an HL signal. And until we get there, we have a set of interesting signals, especially when we are shunting the Vectron from one end of the train to the other. Yes, it is Vectron. Is it possible, CD Radar, that I caught you streaming about the Vectron in Train Sim World 4 a couple of days or even weeks ago now? I just saw it in passing, so I did not say anything. But I think you did that. So, Ballast Boogie, we have a train with a Baureihe 193 Vectron, a great locomotive, not only in real life but also in the game. And before we set up the locomotive, let's set up the train according to what we know how to set up freight trains. You can see we have 31 vehicles in the train. This is the locomotive, and 30 cars. We are quite heavy, more than 2,000 tons and 488.9 meters long. And the radar says, I noticed that PCB does not let you overspeed 420 automatically. Yep. Okay, let's look at this maybe later in context. I've been learning French systems from your video archives, harder than PCB, I'd say. Really? Do you think so? Well, I would love to have more French content where we can actually use the systems outside of TVM 430. Then we would know that better, maybe. So, actually, what are we doing? We need to know how to set our brakes and what PCB mode we are running in. And for that, we would probably use the Excel thing. Another thing that I have noticed, that the game, when I tap out and do something else on my computer, in two instances, the game actually ended. For what reason ever. And did not And I could not resume my scenario, obviously, because it ended. So what do we have here? We have a train with one Vectron that is already set, and then it's 30 vehicles of the Ianos kind. And then I noticed if I punch in the loaded value that they have in timetable mode, then I end up with a much higher weight, 2654, than is shown here on my screen in the game. And so I did the uncoupling procedure to find out that in this scenario, at least, the Ianos cars are only loaded half. What is for our brake percentage not so interesting, because those cars have an automatic load change, so the brake weight just changes with the load. You can see even with more, well, okay, it exceeds. Well, I should have started the sentence in a different way. Even though we have an automatic load change on those cars, it does make a big difference, because we exceed here our automatic load change speed. And no, we don't actually exceed it, but nevertheless, we end up with a different value here for the brake hundertstel. But with only halfway loaded here, we end up with more brake hundertstel. Again, braked mass 58, because we can go up to this, and if we load them up to 85, we only have 58 for brake mass, so we exceed the maximum of our automatic load change. This is why we are getting, with the full load, a much harder to handle train, and will be restricted to run it in U. But since they are only loaded half, we run a train in M with 83 Bremshundertstel. The Vmax is from the cars, still with the stars probably not really calculated in, so we would end up with a train that can run 120, let's say. But we have the weight that is shown in the game. With this setup, we can run it in M and have to set our train to a long loco formation. So out with the axle again and back to the game. It survived, luckily. So let's see what we have our Vectron set to. It is here in the on the screen. We have PCB mode M, that is already good, and Bremsart G. Might more correctly be Bremsstellung G, but nevertheless, it is in G. That is what we want it to be, and then we need to set 5 cars into G as well. Last time I said, I corrected this in the comments, that those levers are always constructed in a way that it is P to the right. That is not correct. It is always the faster one to the right, and this is to the right, so that in the night, when you're actually changing this lever from left to right, you are setting the brakes to a higher efficient mode. And we wanted to set it to G on the first 5 vehicles. So this is what we do. 2 vehicles to G. 3 vehicles to G. 4. And 5. So left is the slower, right is the faster brake. And if we look on the other side, it is the same. Left is the faster, right is left is the slower, right is the faster. And this is why those thingies have some kind of a gear set here in the middle, so that they are actually moving in different directions. Okay, that was setting up the train. For us, what we also can do before we go on with the scenario, let's turn on the safety stuff. Those switches are quite special, because they, if you move them on one cap, they are also moved on the other cap. Since I learned now, thank you Theodorus again, that I can go to the other cap by using this shortcut. You see, on the other cap they are activated as well. So if we're going back to the first cap, you sometimes end up in the second man seat when you're using this shortcut. That is a bit weird. We want to sit in the driver's seat, obviously. So don't do this when driving, because then you can actually end up not pressing your SIFA pedal and the train can go into a SIFA Zwangsbremsung. This is because those buttons would normally probably be not in the cab but in the engine room. But since the engine room is not simulated, we need to have them in the cab. But since in real world there would only be one set of those buttons, most probably, then so they built it in a way that setting the buttons on one cab changes them on the other end as well. Set the train brake to cut out and cut in. We cut in our brakes. Let's see if our lights are set up correctly. What does it say here? Auto, that is good. And the light setup is, yes, ZG1, Spitzensignal at the front and no lights at the back, because we are coupled to cars there. So what we want to use is the AFB. Turn the AFB on. I cannot turn it on yet. Why can I not turn it on yet? Because I have to set the train brake to running, maybe. Okay, then first the train brake to running. Still can't turn on the AFB. Then we start without AFB, if I can't do that here. What does the signal say, by the way? We can't really see it. It is an HL signal telling us we have to stick to 40 now and expect a clear signal at the next signal. So let's see if we're getting any traction out of this. We still have some air in the brake cylinders. Does the PZBs kick in? Yes. Limiting us to 45 in the starting program. What is okay. Now since we're moving, I cannot turn on the AFB that way. To turn on the AFB while moving, I would have to set the throttle to 0. The AFB to max. RFB. Now it works. RFB. And I can set the AFB back to 40. And apply some power. Now it should work. Now being out of the Weichenbereich, we can use the train length counter. Faster. What's the lowest brake handle number that you ever got in the game, Tiger? I think it was something in the low 60s, the 62 or something like this. I don't think that I ever got a 50 Bremshundertstel train. But I'm not sure, maybe I got something of that kind as well. If you want to get really low Bremshundertstels, then try to build a train with loaded tank cars. Or Habine cars, loaded Habine cars. They are really loaded up to the max in the game. So those two trains typically give you the worst Bremshundertstel. So I could accelerate to So 100 now for this short bit, but I know that I have to slow down to 60 to go on the main line, so I won't bother accelerating to more than 60 here on this line. The cows. So you can see this train actually is not so easy to accelerate. Those 2000 tons, you can feel them. I got 1.33 on the loaded Fallen scenario and was ignored with Vectron. I see, yeah, that is actually possible. But I did not really look into those old cars like the Fallens in the pre-Dresden DLCs, because they are sometimes really weird. So 33 is actually a really low number. So just checking that my keys are working. And so far there were no white lights, no additional white lights on any signal, because we are in the HL signaling territory that typically do not have white lights, and there was not any situation where there would have been required a white additional light on the signals. So plan is to drive this train to the station where we do the run around and then stop it there, go in the presentation. After the presentation we look at 2 different services, and then I would like to try to go to a safe game with the very end of this scenario here, so that we cut out the driving part in the middle. We're running up to a distance signal, what we can see from those announcement boards. And we can see that this is a flashing green light with a yellow number, so we are in the KS signaling system now. Flashing KS1 with ZS3V6, announcing a limit to 60. We have to acknowledge it, and we're getting 1000 Hertz influencing or monitoring within the PZBM. We have to slow down to 70, and this is why there was actually no point in accelerating to anything beyond the 60 that we are aiming for. And there comes the main signal. KS1 with the ZS3-6. This is where the limit to 60 begins. According to the signal, not necessarily to the track. But here in this case, it is the same. Running uphill until we are up on the main line, and then it is going downhill again, so I keep the speed deliberately a bit below the 60 so that the AFB does not have to struggle too hard. Now this is what the 60s are for the two switches that we are going through. We're not stopping here, we are going to Niederau. That means I can use faster train length counter, so that we know when we are allowed to accelerate to 120. Since we fiddled around with so much stuff, this Talent 2 has to wait for us, probably, until we passed. Now we can accelerate to the 120. And we can allow some throttle. When braking this train out of a velocity of 120 kilometers and running downhill, what we will be doing when we get close to Niederau, we will see that we really need to brake seriously, to apply a lot of brake power to slow down to the 70 after we got the 1000 Hertz monitoring. So it is maybe not a bad idea to slow down early, so that we do not have to burn too much energy to slow down. Next distance signal is announced. 3 strikes, 2 strike, 1 strike. And it is a clear KS1, so we can go on full line speed of 120. Here is the corresponding main signal. As it was announced, it is true and clear. And it is not long until we get the next main signal here. That was maybe a repeater that we passed. What I called the main signal. That was the main signal now. And on the repeater, you might have seen there was no white light on the bottom, even though it was a repeater, because it was a KS repeater showing a non-flashing KS1. We will get to this in the presentation. We already covered this in the videos about the signaling systems, but we will have a look at it in context today in the presentation. So, next distance signal is announced. 3 strikes, 2 strikes, 1 strike. Distance signal board and clear KS1. Level crossing remotely controlled, so we don't need to pay attention to this. At least not too much. Main signal as announced. KS1. Now I'm already slowing down a bit, I think. What I found quite handy is to add some dynamic brakes with the Vectron, even though it should actually do the blending on its own. And the next distance signal is at flashing KS1 with 6. So we have to slow down. And this is why I slowed down in advance. Because now we have to slow to 70. And if we are going 120 and have to slow down to 70 in a 0.5 descent, you probably have to go up to brake notch 6. Or at least 5. This was the repeater. You saw the white light at the repeater under the green flashing light. What is correct, because the flashing green has a repeater light. Here again, repeater light for the 6. No magnet, but operating rules still require us to acknowledge, and now the KS1 with the ZS36. Have to slow down to the 45 until we get to the 500 Hertz. And then to the 30 as soon as the 500 Hertz monitoring starts within the 153 meters. What is really cool now is that if you activate the air brake handle, you don't start with 1A, but you go directly to 1B, and then you can go back to 1A if you want to release the braking force a bit. So maybe I'm a bit slow here when running in, but I love it when those heavy trains are going so slowly through the station, like a big ship. Here is probably the 500 Hertz incoming. Yes, here is the 500 Hertz. Don't forget the CIFA. We can see that the HP 0 in front of us is already showing the position light, the call on light. What is a bit weird, because we should not get the call on light before we actually uncoupled. I would have thought, at least. But hey. We know what the dispatcher wants to tell us. Run the locomotive to the other end. Uncouple the freight and get ready to run around to the back. So, let's see what the scenario wants us to do. Before uncoupling the cars, I think we should at least apply full service brake so that the cars actually remain in place as soon as we uncouple them. And now stop is indicated. What we should probably do before we do this is have some light at the end of our locomotive. Let's see if we can do that. And put the ZG2 signal at the end of our Vectron. It actually works. So the trick is actually to have this thing here working with the lights. As I have found out, it is necessary to have both caps, the lights on both caps here, this one, set to auto. As soon as one of them is not set to auto, it is not working properly anymore. I would set the AFB to 25, why 25? Because we are a shunting service now. If we were not a shunting service, we weren't allowed to pass the signal here. It's a main signal of white, showing HP 0, preventing, without those white lights, any services, shunting services and train services alike from passing. And if the position lights, the SH1 or RA12, in the Eastern Germany, we will get to this in the presentation, are shown that only shunting services are allowed to pass, and shunting services are limited to 25 kilometers per hour. So probably now we are a shunting service, otherwise we should not be able to pass this here. So now I need to release my brakes, obviously, otherwise I won't get this thing moving. That was quick. Brake pipe is filled. Cylinders are still full because the AFB at least is holding us in place. So as soon as I apply some throttle, the AFB should release its holding brake, or it does. But not completely, for whatever reason. Yeah, and now typically we would have a 500 Hertz here, so that even with the two white lights on, we need to press the override key. But the Befehl 40 does not light up here on the indicators. I don't know if this is just specific to this signal here, or if it has not been fixed. So override button is this here. Painted in red, so that we know that it goes with the... Well, yeah, we have discussed this, handbrakes on the cars or not. Most people in the comments have said that it should normally be enough to put the brakes to full service and then uncouple. And if you want to be sure, then you would have to open the angle cocks at the brake pipe so that it depletes completely. While I was explaining this, the holding brake from the AFB was getting me. One meter, 2 meter, 3 meter, one. That was where I wanted to end up. So for changing ends, I found it easiest to use the train brake and put it to full service. With the light locomotive it's typically not a problem because the brake pipe feels so fast. Set the throttle to off. It's in brake, set it to off. Also the AFB.
AFB. AFB. AFB.
It is no longer using the AFB holding brake, but we put it to full service before we did it. Then we can cut it out. That should hold the locomotive in place. Put it to neutral. Set the master key to off. Alright, set the signal lights override. Okay, I do this for the scenario, but then I will put them back to auto so that we can actually use it from the other end properly. Head to the other cab, so I can leave the safety system switches on. As we have found, now I opened the window, that was not what I intended to. See, they are still on. And I leave those at auto for the moment. Z, master key. Reverse it to forward. Yeah, they want us to headlights to override it. But I will put it back to auto and handle this from the computer screen. Cut it in. Train brake to running. Wait a sec.
AFB.
I want the AFB first.
AFB.
We are most probably still a shunting service, I guess, and limited to 25 here. Then I try to do the thing with the lights, and as soon as we activated this cap here, the cap that you're sitting in should be vorne, front. And so the other thing should be back. Never forget to press the E key. And let's see if that worked. We have the configuration that we wanted for the lights. That is nice. So set the train brake to running. The AFB is on, so we will have the AFB holding brake. Power to get moving. Do the signals allow us to pass? Yeah, we have this setting here. What is in Western Germany called an SH1, in Eastern Germany an RA12. We will get to the difference as soon as we get to the presentation. What I want to direct your attention to is this mast sign here. This is not the typical mast sign that we have, and not the one that we had when we passed the red signal with the position light signal. Typically it is white, red, white, and here we have white with two black dots. So what this different mast sign tells us, we will get to it in the presentation. Can already see that the red ones here don't have two red lights, like many in other places, especially in Western Germany, but only one red light here. Still we are not allowed to pass this one, but the right one is the one for us. So we always have to apply power beyond a certain threshold, otherwise the AFB holding brake will not release. Now it released properly. And we can pass this RA12 service, because we're probably a shunting service now, and this is why I think I'm still limited to 25. So handbrakes, Theodorus, to come back to this. There are some rules across the world that tell you how many handbrakes you have to fix if you leave your cars in a gradient. Then it is sometimes not enough to rely on the force of the normal train brake that is activated when the angle cocks are open and the brake pipe is depleted. And especially with American trains, you sometimes have those fast release applications in the train brakes on the cars that use air from the emergency brake reservoir to release the brakes faster, and if those thingies malfunction, then sometimes a train can start rolling if you are not doing this properly. So sometimes in the gradient or in other situations the operating rules provide for some handbrakes are fastened. But typically in a station or yard area it should be in most cases enough to apply full service, uncouple and then open the angle cocks and leave them open. I remember a Danish driver was cited on this, and he said that you should have to apply the Füllbremse. What I think translates to full service. Reduction to 3.5 bar. So, approaching the point where we have to stop. Here on the left you can see the back side of the signal that will be relevant soon as we turn around again. That is protecting the switch there. Oh, we're actually going uphill, so should not apply too much brake force too fast. Even a bit more power needed to get us up the hill. Again, I use the full service on the train brake to change cabs. Throttle to 0. Cut out the brakes after putting them to full service. Set the reverser to neutral. Off with the AFB. Set the master key to off. Alright. Set the signal lights to the headlights to signal lights. I do it for the benefit of the scenario and back to auto so that we can use. Then I will probably get off on this side so that I don't jump. I have to use the steps. So that I don't jump on the tracks on the other side. The master key to on. Reverse it to forward. And it wants us to set the lights to headlight, and I put it back to auto. Cut in the brake valve here. Then it wants us to start. So I use the AFB again. 25. Set speed. And then can we go? No, the signal is showing a red light. With this mast sign that we have already seen. Are we allowed to pass this as a shunting service? No, without a written order, I think, for the red light, even in Eastern Germany. So, before actually starting here the scenario, I can release the brakes because the holding brake will hold us in place. Contact the signaler to access the freight. We are now running into an occupied track. This is always dangerous, so we will have to call the signaler. And what does the signaler do? Nothing. Even though this telephone... Ah, no, he did something. Proceed at restricted speed, it tells us. And what did he do? He switched the signal off completely. He did not switch it to two white lights. Can we pass it now? Can we pass it as a shunting service? Can we pass it as a train service? With this signal and what the signaler said, proceed at restricted speed. I think we can actually pass it, but we will get to this in the presentation, but not without turning the light configuration about, because we need to have the white lights at the front and the red lights at the back of our locomotive. Yeah, and since we are going to meet the train in the occupied track, we are definitely not a train service, but a shunting service at this point. And we may pass this signal even though it does not show white lights and it is switched off, because the signaler gave us verbal permission to pass it. We have our verbal order here. We will get to this in the presentation again, but not to keep this open too long. So, this is actually the point where I will leave this scenario here. We would couple up to the train and then go to Riesa. I will leave it running in the background so that we see if at some point it actually cuts out for whatever reason, and go to the presentation. And the presentation is about all the different white lights that we can have on German signals across all the three relevant signaling system, HV, KS and HL. Some of them are actually signals in their own right, like the Ersatzsignal, the ZS1, the replacement signal, or the SH1 that we have seen here alone or on the ground, standing high, or in... that's one thing. Well, we'll get to this later, maybe. And others are just additional lights that are shown together with the actual signal. And we will go through all of that. We will start with the Zusatzlicht, the additional light, the additional white light that is not a signal in its own right, but it is shown together with a signal. I have always cited here Weißes Zusatzlicht, white additional light, and here are the things, or the locations in the signal book. The Richtlinie Directive 301 is the signaling book for the Deutsche Bahn, and here you can those are the modules and the sections and the paragraphs where you can find the rules that I will be talking about right now. So I wanted to start with the KS system, because that is the system that is installed on new tracks, and every time when signals are built new, then you would get KS signals. So this is why I would regard this as the main signaling system in Germany now. I would start with that. And the idea of this graphic here is to put in one overview what white lights you will have on what signals. We know that in Germany we typically distinguish between main signals and distant signals. So if you have on the main signal a clear green signal called KS1, green main signal, this is the mast sign that is telling you this is a main signal, a typical main signal. Then you would have a distant signal showing you the same aspect, KS1, but with a different sign at the mast here with the V board for the Vorsignaltafel, NE2. Then we know that sometimes we can have repeaters, that are signals that are repeating the distance signal, and those show the same aspect in the KS system here, the steady green light, KS1, and they do not have any sign at their mast, so that you always know this is a repeater. So this is a distance signal with a distance signal board. Without any sign, it is a repeater. And if it has a mast sign of that kind, or there are other kinds too, but typically they have this kind of mast sign, and it is a main signal, even if they show the same aspect. So that we know that this is the progression to the clear signal, I put a green background underneath it. Sometimes you have distance signals that are closer than 950 meters on main railway lines. Why is that important? We have talked about this. Typically you have a regular braking distance between the distance signal and the main signal of 1 kilometer on main railways, so that everything is standardized in that way, that with the brake hundertstel that we talked about in the videos last week and 2 weeks ago and the week before, that you can always make sure that the train is capable of stopping within this regular braking distance of 1000 meters. Sometimes it can't be done properly, so that the distance signal is actually closer to the main signal, and if it is closer than 5% less than the regular braking distance, what translates to closer than 950 meters, then you sometimes can get additional warning. And in this case, when you're going to a green signal, if the distance signal is closer than the typical distance, then you will get no different aspect here. You will get the typical KS1 steady green at the distance signal with distance signal board. So mind, I will say this a couple of times again, this is not a progression of 4 signals, but of 3 signals with 2 alternates. This is why the screen is a bit less green than the other one, and the signal is not put here on the line but lifted in the air. So this is alternatively, so you can either have one of those 2 signals and then the progression goes on with a repeater that does not necessarily need to be there but can be there, and then the main signal. The progression to stop would look like this. The main signal obviously showing HP0, the distance signal showing the KS2, the steady yellow, at the signal with the NE2 distance signal board, and now for the first time we have a white additional light. If we have a KS2 aspect at the distance signal announcing that the next main signal will be red, and this one is closer than 950 meters, closer than less than 5%, or the distance is less than 5% of the regular braking distance, then we will have this white light on the top of the signal. Top left indicates us this KS distance signal is closer than 950 meters to the next main signal, so that we can prepare and brake harder maybe. If we get a repeater, a KS2, we get the same aspect, but now the marker light, the additional light, is not on the top but at the bottom, so that you can see on the signal itself whether you are actually passing a repeater or the distance signal in itself. So this is specific for the KS system. We have the additional light, but there are 2 different spots for the additional white light. On the distance signal, the full-blown distance signal that is closer than 950 meters, is it on top, and if it is a repeater, then obviously the repeater is typically closer than the regular braking distance, but to mark it as a repeater is on the bottom. And the first situation then I want to look at, the clear situation, the stop situation, and then the reduce your speed situation. This is why it is yellow here. How would a main signal in the KS system tell you that from this point you have to be under a certain speed limit? It is a KS1 steady with a white numeral, with a white number, and the number is telling you how fast you can go at this point. So with a 4 it would be 40. I've chosen this 40 because it corresponds well but with the signaling in the HV system, but it can obviously be any other number or any other numeral here. But this is for our example here. This is a limit of 40 at this main signal. How is it announced? At the distance signal, you get a flashing KS1. Again a case 1, but to distinguish it from the progression to green, it will be flashing. And it will have an additional signal with it, the ZS3V, the yellow numeral, announcing that at the next main signal you will be reduced to 40. That is what we know. And in case the distance signal is closer, then again the same aspect with the same signal ZS3V with the 4, but now we have the marker, like the additional white light, the white additional light on top, just like with the KS2. And on the repeater we have the same thing, so it's the same flashing green with the 4, and now it is at the bottom. So for the KS system, to round it up again, in all the situations that we can encounter, be it for clear or reduce speed or stop, we can have additional lights only on signals that are closer than the regular braking distance and are full-blown distance signals, or on repeaters. But we only have them if we have on the distance signal or the repeater an indication that requires the driver to actually slow down to a stop or to a speed limit. If it is clear, if we have clear skies ahead, then we won't get the additional light, because we don't need this specific information. So, and then on a full-blown distance signal, the marker light will be on top, and on the repeater it will be on the bottom. That is the situation for the KS system. In the HV system it is slightly different. On the progression to the clear signal, we will have, and those are the VR signals, that are the distance signal in the HV system, with the diagonally arranged lights. Green over green diagonally will be the distance signal that announces that the next main signal is clear. And here we have again the situation, if this signal is closer to the main signal than the 950 meters, we get an information here. So this marker light will be in the HV system on, even though it is announcing a green signal to tell us that this distance signal is closer to the main signal. And on the repeater it will be on again, the same additional white light, because the HV signaling system, the VR signals, only have one white light that can be lit. So in both cases, either if it is a repeater or if it is a distance signal closer than 950 meters to the main signal, we will have this one lit. And you will have to look at the distance signal board to see if it is a distance signal or if it is a repeater. So this is obviously different to the KS system here. Or actually two difference to the KS system. First, we do not have different marker lights for close distance signals and repeaters, but the same additional white light, and we can see it already on the progression to clear. It's not like in the KS system where the progression to clear, the white lights are off, but we have the white lights regardless, we will see, of the aspect that the signal is showing. So the progression to red, be it with 1 or with 2 lights, will be the VR0, yellow over yellow diagonally, and obviously we will have the white light lit again on the repeater as well as on the closer distance signal. If we have a signal that announces that we have to go slow, and we know that green over yellow without any numeral in the HV system is typically a reduction to 40. This is why I chose the 40 here. It will be announced with the yellow and then climbing green at the distance signal, and at the closer distance signal again, and then the repeater again. So we can see if a distance signal or a repeater is closer than the 950 meters, it will always show the white light, regardless of its aspect and regardless of the fact whether it is a distance signal or a distance signal repeater in the HV system. This is what distinguishes the HV system from the KS system with the white lights, and what makes it sometimes a bit weird. So this is nothing new. We have discussed it in the video about the HV system and the KS system, but you can still find routes in the game that are totally off the rocker with this. In Schnellfahrstrecke Köln you find a lot of those signals here, distant signals of the KS type showing a plain KS1 with the white marker light on top. On the other hand, you can find repeaters flashing KS1 without the repeater marking light. And then on Bremen-Oldenburg, for example, you can find repeaters without the marker light, with green over green maybe, or even with yellow climbing green without the marker light on. It can be a bit confusing, but it's actually not so super confusing. Last but not least, the HL system at this point. See, Ray, I just read your thing. You use white light even for green signals here too. Yeah. I guess this is the traditional way of doing it. It's just a thing in the more modern KS system where we drop the green light, or we drop the white light with the green light because we do not need this additional information. On the HL system, it is slightly different. It can have those marker lights like in the KS system, but typically they do not have any white lights on the HL system in Eastern Germany. If we are approaching a main signal here, that is green, then we will obviously get the green aspect on the distant signal as well. And if the distant signal is closer than the 950 meters, it can have this special distant signal board with the white light in form of a white circle incorporated in the distant signal board. We have seen that in... we will probably see that when we drive our train home to Riesa later. There is one thing, one of them is in the game actually. And the repeaters, because they cannot show the white light, will have this additional sign with the white circle mounted to the repeater. And this actually holds true for all the progressions, for the progression to green, for the progression to red, and for the progression to speed limit. It all works more or less the same way. Cannot be different because you obviously cannot change the signs that are mounted to the signals according with the aspects. So distant signals that are closer have the white circle incorporated in the distant signal board, and the repeaters will have this additional sign with the white circle or the white disc and the black circle, if you want it like this, mounted to the post. So that is more or less the graphic that shows you everything about the white additional lights in the three relevant signaling system, what signal should have it on and what signal should have it not on, and whether it should be on the top or on the bottom of the signal. There is one instance in the rules where you can find this thingy here with the white light also. But before we get to this, there will be a new version of the signaling book of the Richtlinie 301 that will be valid starting at December 15, 2024. And there will be for the first time a table or a section that actually states at what in what situations you will have a Kennlicht and in what situations you will have a Zusatzlicht. So that is actually quite interesting because it was a bit scattered through the Richtlinie. It does not make a change. It does not change anything, but it maybe makes things a bit clearer than it was before. So that is an interesting thing that I stumbled across when I was preparing this graphics here, that next year we will actually have a new form of the signaling book with some new rules. So, but I announced that there is one more situation where you can encounter this additional light, and this is when you are approaching a level crossing that is not remotely controlled, but it has some technical safety systems like those flashing red lights when you approach them. If you want to know more about them, watch the video in the Niedertalbahn level crossing signals. We went into more detail there. This was the thing with the rhomboid boards, and the rhomboid boards, BU2 Routentafel, were announcing those signals here. You can see them a lot in the Niedertalbahn, and you know that there is this random event in the Niedertalbahn that sometimes those signals don't allow you to cross the level crossing, and you have to manually activate the safety systems on the level crossing. Great thing. If it is just like with a yellow disc on the bottom and no flashing white light on the top, then it is showing BU0. You are not allowed to pass the level crossing. Lottery if it is flashing or not. Yes. Isn't it great, a lottery? And if it is flashing like this, then it is called a BU1. And then this supervision signal, this Überwachungssignal, allows you to pass the level crossing. And in the Niedertalbahn, again, it is a lottery. Most of the time it is flashing, but sometimes it is not. And then you have to stop in front of the signal and get off your train and activate the safety measures on this train, on this level crossing by hand. We have also learned that there can be a repeater closer to the level crossing. And this repeater, just like with the repeaters in the HL system, can have the white disc on an additional sign, so that you know this is a repeater, this is the actual signal, and this is a repeater. Überwachungssignal Wiederholer. Supervision signal repeater, yes. And the supervision signal is typically put up in the usual regular braking distance, so that you can actually stop your train in front of the level crossing. Good thing is you can use PCB to verify if it is actually flashed. Yeah, that is true. You just hit the key, because typically there is a PCB 1000 Hertz magnet attached to it, and if it is not flashing and you pass it and hit your acknowledge key for the PCB and the 1000 Hertz monitoring turns on, then you know, whoops, it was not flashing. If it doesn't turn on, it probably was flashing. Or both malfunction, or it was not flashing and the 1000 Hertz magnet was malfunctioning. So you cannot actually be sure. But at least if it turns on the 1000 Hertz monitoring, then you should assume that it was not flashing. So where does our additional white light come into play here? In case that this is closer to the level crossing than the regular braking distance. We have learned in the Niedertalbahn stream, then you have typically this white triangle indicating this here now. And this white triangle was also sitting on the rhomboid board to warn you that the supervision signal will be closer to the level crossing than the regular braking distance. So slow down maybe a bit, so that you can prepare for that. And there is a different version of this supervision signal for the west of Germany. And it looks like this. It does not necessarily have this yellow border, and it does not have this yellow disc, but it has a yellow light instead of the yellow disc. So this is a disc, this is a light. It is hard to distinguish this in the PowerPoint presentation. This is why I put it next to it. And this specific type of signal, it is described here in section 2 and section 3, subsection 3 respectively. And this type of signal can have a white additional light if it is actually closer than the regular braking distance to the level crossing, and it is not flashing. And just like the KS signals, if the white light on this type of supervision signal is flashing like this, then the white additional light is not on. Whereas if we have a repeater of that thingy here, then it is on all the time, denoting it as a repeater. So if you have a supervision signal of that kind flashing with the white light on, you know it's the repeater. And then you don't necessarily need this board here. So this is what I have found in the rules, the only application of this white additional light outside of the normal signals for the three signaling systems for supervision signals in front of a level crossing. If you want to know more about those supervision signals and the signaling for level crossings that are not remotely supervised about the distances here and about those counting boards with the rhomboids and the spacing between it, I invite you to watch the corresponding video for the Niedertalbahn. And now for the juicy stuff. Now we have talked about the white Zusatzlicht, the additional light. Now I would like to talk about the Kennlicht, the marker light, and the signals that consist of white signals. That is 1, SH1 and RA12. And then in the end about the Zugdeckungssignal and how this works. So what is a Kennlicht, a marker light? It was only mentioned here in this part of the signaling book. And it can be turned off to show the driver that a properly working signal is deliberately switched off because it is not needed and can be ignored. That is the idea of the Kennlicht. And it is actually also some new text in the new version of the signaling book that will be valid next year in December, that describes the Kennlicht even more. What does it look like in the HV system? You just have one steady white light on your signal, and on the VR signals you only have this one white light that is typically the Zusatzlicht. So the same lamp will give you with a dark signal the marker light and tell you that this signal is deliberately switched off. It is deliberately dark. And you might think back on the situation that we had a couple of weeks ago when we were running our light Taurus out of Fulda. And there was this one signal, and I said, yeah, maybe this is probably wrong. And Alistair Lynn put it in the comments that this is switched off deliberately, and it is a marker light, a Kennlicht. And yeah, I researched it, as I always do if someone comments and puts me right. And of course he was right, as he usually is. And this is what it works. We will look at this later in the stream again. So signals that are not used, that are not needed for the path that you are running, can be switched off and marked as switched off with this additional light. Why do we need it anyway? Can we not just switch it off? No, because a dark signal needs to be treated as the worst aspect that it can show for safety reasons. Because if there is a malfunction, actually, then the driver can cause harm if he or she passes the signal. So a dark signal that is dark without us knowing why it is dark must be treated as, if it is a main signal, red, or if it is a distant signal, as a yellow over yellow, announcing stop at the next main signal. And to prevent this from happening, so that the driver can just pass the signal, we can turn on the marker light, a white non-flashing light. In the KS system it works just the same way. We would probably use the one on top. Even though I'm not entirely sure, I can probably use the lower one if it is a repeater as well. But typically you would probably use the one on top. Maybe if a repeater only has the one in the bottom, then I would use this one. In the HL system, only main signals that can show the position light signal along with the red signal have a white light to show. Sometimes they don't have a white light to show. I don't know what happens then. Maybe they can use the Kennlicht thing then. If there are actually distant signals, those that cannot show the position light signal, if they can have a white light, the rules allow it if there are actually signals of that kind in the real life in the world. I don't know, but if so, then it would always be a white light, not flashing, turned on steadily. That is the Kennlicht, the marker light. A properly working signal deliberately switched off so that it can be ignored. What is the difference between a marker light and the replacement signal, Ersatzsignal? The Ersatzsignal flashes. The marker light does not flash. And what does it mean? Here it is not an additional light. Here it is a signal in its own right with its own name, Ersatzsignal, and its own shortcut, ZS1, Zusatzsignal, additional signal 1. And it allows the passing of a signal showing HP0 or a malfunctioning light main signal. We will get to this. So what does it look like? It looks like this in the HV system. Signal is dark, for example, and the white light is flashing, telling us, okay, we can go on a Ersatzsignal past this signal here. It is not deliberately switched off, but something is wrong, so we have this one flashing. It can also work with a red one, HP 0, or with a signal showing weird signal aspects like green over red. And if the white light is flashing, it allows us to pass it. But this only works on a light main signal. A malfunctioning semaphore signal cannot be passed on a Ersatzsignal. We will see that what it looks like on a semaphore signal in a second. But I just point this out. The malfunctioning signal can only be passed if it is a light main signal. This is like America Classic, you say. The flashing white light. I think they have this too. Yeah, that's true. KS system obviously looks like this, and HL system would, if it has it. I don't know if they can have a white flashing light in the HL signals. Probably not, because the signals don't use a lot of flashing, and the white light's only for the RA12 together with the HP 0. So probably it does not have a capability of doing that, but if it has, the rule would allow for it. And it can only be main signals. This is why I only put main signals here, because the distance signal can obviously be passed. It does not need the Ersatzsignal. This is the old version of the Ersatzsignal. It is also lights that are turned on, with 3 of them in this delta formation, and this is the Ersatzsignal that you typically find on semaphore signals. So, for example, in the Niedertalbahn, you find them there, and they allow you to pass a signal showing HP 0, but not to pass a malfunctioning semaphore signal. So if you encounter a semaphore signal where one of the blades is pointing like straight up into the air and the other one is lying on the floor, then this is not a signal that can be passed with a Ersatzsignal. So this is like America Classic, green over red over black hole. Yeah, that's true. But let's stick to the German stuff. It is complicated enough. So what if you actually want to tell the driver that he can completely ignore a signal and you cannot turn on the marker light because the signal maybe is just built there and it is not connected, so you don't have power on it, and you don't want every driver to stop at the black signal and to tell the driver to ignore it? What can you do? You can mark them as invalid, ungültige Signale. You would put this on top of it, like cross it out with white boards, with black borders. Only thing that you need to remember, you can also obviously cross out these weird signals that are malfunctioning, not only the black ones, and then driver can just ignore the signal. One thing you need to be cautious, if there are 2 signal heads on one signal, like this one here with the VR distance signal, and you only cross out or mark the main signal as invalid, then this one would still be a valid signal, dark, and you would have to treat it as a signal showing yellow over yellow, because it is the worst aspect and the VR signal can show, and you have to drive in a way that you prepare for stopping at the next main signal. So if you want to cross that out again, then you have to cross it out in its own right. Again, you can read it up in this part of the current version of the signaling book, and here it will be a section in the new version of the signaling book that specifically states that a black VR signal needs to be treated as showing VR 0, expect to stop at the next main signal. Some combinations here. If you have a VR signal at a main signal post, so 2 signal heads at the same signaling post, and the main signal is showing red, HP 0, then the VR signal will be off without marker light. This is stated in this section of the signaling book here, so don't need to be confused at this point. Since you are not passing the signal, obviously, you don't need to expect anything at the next main signal. And as soon as it clears, the signal will come to life. And if it stays dark, then you have to treat it as a VR0 signal. Whereas if the signal stays dark, if you get anything else but an HP0 signal, then typically you would have to treat it, according to this provision here, as a VR0, yellow over yellow diagonally, and have to prepare to stop. Unless, if it is not needed for the path, then it can actually be dark here. Probably you would use the marker light to tell the driver, hey, you don't need to treat this as a malfunctioning signal. Same obviously with any other aspect here. A ground or a protection signal, those on the ground, sometimes on a stick or whatever, together with a green signal can be dark if it is at the same spot. This is stated here in this part of the section, and the same applies for if it is shown with Ersatzsignal. Then you do not need to treat this one as a signal showing the worst aspect being HP0 and stop. Even if it is dark, you can go by this signal here. Okay, those was marker light, replacement signal. And now we get to SH1 DS301, that is telling us that this is a signal that works in the western part of Germany, or that part of the railroad networks that was the Federal Republic of Germany, because the reunification of Germany. And the RA12 is the signal for the part of the railway network that was in the German Democratic Republic before the reunification, so Eastern Germany signal. It tells us that the protection is lifted, and you can read it up in this part of the section here. That's this signal. You find it typically on the floor, sitting in the gravel, in the ballast. Sometimes it is up on a stick in the air, then it is called a high signal of this kind. As a standalone version, and as we have seen it in the scenario already, it can also be shown on a main signal head together with a red light. So what is the other setting that this signal can show if it is not showing SH1 or RA12? It does not show SH0 according to the current books, but the opposite would be the HP0. The red one would be always HP0 here. So this signal can typically be switched between this position light and then the red light. In the eastern part of Germany, Eastern Germany, or let's say the DV301 section, you would typically have only one red light. In the western part, you would have two red lights, typically on those standalone protection signals. So this kind of signal SH1 is protection signal, and protection signals are typically Sperrsignale, so signals that just allow you not to go into a certain piece of track. The not a light version, but the semaphore version for the SH1 would be this one. We know that from another Niederau stream where we talked about this. And on the semaphore front, we would have this signal actually as an SH0. So in the semaphore world, we have SH1 and SH0 on this signal. Open, closed, you can go, you may not pass. And in the light signaling world, even if it looks, we should have the SH0 here, we don't. We have SH1 and HP0. Just to repeat this, because it is a bit out of the matrix. Together with a main signal, it can be also shown not only as a standalone signal, but together with the, as we all know, together with a main signal. If it is in the HV system and we have a signal with two red lamps, as many main signal in the HV system have, then if it is shown on the signal head with the main signal, always one of the two red lamps extinguishes. So we have a video about passing red signals, and there is an explanation why it is like this and the historic development. Again, according to Alistair Lynn's comments on the previous video. Quite interesting, but what we should know, because this is how it is supposed to happen, it is not always happening in the game like this. As soon as the white additional lights are turned on, there is only one red light on the HV main signal. The second one turns off. And it is the same one if you're actually using a standalone version of this shunting signal, as they sometimes call it, of this protection signal. If you have two red lamps on it preventing you to go, and then the dispatcher switches it so that only shunting services are allowed to pass. Not all services, but shunting services, so that one red lamp has to stay on, and it can only be one of them, not both red lamps can stay on together with this one here. On the KS system it works more or less the same, but the lights are positioned a bit differently, like in the bottom left corner, so that you can use this one lamp that you would use in a repeater, for example. We have seen this in the game actually. On the HL main signals, they are typically around the red lamp. So that would be always the same signal, but they appear in a different spot on the signaling head. So what is the difference between SH1 in the west and RA12 in the east? This is a bit confusing. We have to always keep in mind that there are more or less two main types of movements that are allowed on our railway networks. This is train services. Train always needs to have a timetable, needs to be given the order to move from A to B, typically from one station to the other, or a point where the train can actually start and to a point where the train can end, whereas all the other movement that is allowed, like typically in a yard or in a station, those are shunting movements. So if you're shunting your locomotive around from one end to the other, you are a shunting service typically, and then limited to the 25 kilometers per hour usually. And the special rules for shunting services apply. It's, for example, that only shunting services can pass a red signal with those white additional lights. So, and in the west, for the SH1, if it is a standalone signal here, it allows both train and shunting services to pass. Whereas, if it is shown together with HP0, if a red lamp is on, like here, or here, or here, or here, then it allows only shunting services to pass. This is also connected with the historical development, I think. So this is the situation in the west. So you have to distinguish the same signals. SH1 sometimes allows trains to pass if it is shown without a red lamp on the signal head. And if it has a red lamp on with it, then it allows only shunting services to pass. In the light word here, if this SH1 in the semaphore world is shown with an HP1, then still only shunting services can pass and not the train service. If you want the train service to pass, then you have to remove the red lamp. Whereas in the east, on the RA12, it is always so that this signal RA12, the white lights, only allow shunting services to pass. So it does not distinguish between that. So also, or even a signal of that kind that only has the two white lights diagonally above each other, only allows shunting services. Still harder to remember French aspect law. I don't know, maybe I'm not that familiar yet. Okay. We'll get to the French aspect in a different video, but if that is easy to remember, it's great, because it is not so easy to read it up in the rules either. So you have to do some digging and put it in a matrix to have this distinction here, that in the west, the SH1, the signal that looks the same, if it is alone without a red lamp, allows train services to pass, whereas in the east, it never does. If the red lamp is on, then both is the same, then only shunting is allowed, not train services. And if you have it standalone, then there is a difference between west and east. Those two white lamps, the signal RH12 for example, or SH1, can also appear with this sign here, the W, the orange W. You see that a lot, especially in Dresden Nahverkehr and Trante-Rampe. This is a signal that requires a shunting service to stop. And if the dispatcher wants the shunting service to be allowed to pass this signal, he has to turn on those two white lights. They can be below the W, or they can even be arranged in this quite artificial formation here. On the W, set on one of the arms and the other one underneath. We will see that when we get to Riesa, because in the new version of Dresden Riesa they actually activated those white lights. It's quite sweet. So the RA11 is this W sign with the SH1 for Western Germany, and the RA11A, that will be the eastern version of it, together with the RA12. But both of them only apply to shunting services. If you're a train service, then you need to stop at the W signs anyway. Only if you are a shunting service, and then you can pass if the white lights are on. If you are a train service and the white lights are on, obviously you can pass anyway. And now we get to the situation that we had in the game where the signal was switched off. And also answering the question, how can we get in the east a train service to pass a signal at all of that kind here? Because this signal only allows shunting services, and the red version of it allows no services at all. So how do we get the train past this signal if not with a written order that allows us to pass a red signal at any rate? Well, this is where this special mast sign comes into place, because it tells us that a train service may pass a signal showing RA12, except as an exception to what it typically says. It tells us that RA12 only allows shunting services to pass. So we need a special mast sign like this one with the two black dots on the white ground, allowing us that on this special signal a train service can pass. The shunting service can pass because of the RA12 alone, and the train service can pass the RA12 as an exception because of this mast sign. This can be read up here in those two sections. This is the 301 is the signaling book again, and the 408 is more or less the main operating rules. And train services may pass with RA12 or a dark signal. Even we will get to this here. Even if the signal is dark, a train service can pass this if the mast sign is like this. The thing is, in the game, in the scenario that we played, we were not a train service, we were a shunting service. And as a shunting service, we needed at the dark signal either RA12, what we did not get, or a verbal order. And we don't need a written order at this signal, but as a shunting service, it is enough to have a verbal order. And this is what the signaler gave us on the phone. He said, pass it with restricted speed. This is why we were allowed to pass it. If the signal has the white, red, white mast sign and it is dark, we would have to have a written order to be able to pass it. The verbal order would not be enough, in my understanding at least. So this SH1 and RA12, I think this is quite confusing with the difference between Western and Eastern Germany, and that you need in Eastern Germany those special mast signs for a train service to actually pass a signal of that kind. But then it can also be switched off. As a shunting service, on the other hand, the RA12 is enough. If it is dark, you need the verbal order by the dispatcher. So, one last thing on this slide, and this is our Zugdeckungssignal. translates to train cover signal. And what is that? That is a signal that can be switched between two things. It can either show HP0, a red light, typically only one, even in the West from what I've seen, and the Kennlicht, the marker light. So unlike those signals here on the bottom left, it does not switch between SH1 or R812 and HP0 on the other side, but it switches between HP0, the stop position, and the marker light, the Kennlicht, for not relevant for you, switched off deliberately. And those are the signals that are typically used in station areas where you use them as a draw ahead signal. Thanks Sire Moon for this term, a draw ahead signal, where you want to let in a train for half the platform, for example, while the other train is in the other half of the platform or just leaving. Then you can use a train cover signal, Zugdeckungssignal, to separate this block, this platform area, into one or more segments, so that the train that is coming into the station does not need to wait for the other train to leave it completely before it can actually enter. And in the game we have some of those signals that switch between HP0 and the marker light in Bremen, I think, and in Würzburg, and I think we will go in the game to Würzburg and have a little demonstration with the free roam to see how those thingies work. Yeah, I think that was what I wanted to talk about today. It sounded so little, but it is actually quite a lot of lore to know about Zusatzlicht, Kennlicht, Ersatzsignal, and the SH1 RA12 signals, and then the special application as a Zugdeckungssignal. And I think there is, in the new version of the signaling book, there is a little passage about the train cover signal. It was obviously used before, but now it is mentioned in the rules specifically, or it will be next year, December 15th. Yeah, that was that. That was the presentation for today. And if it did not break, we can go back to the game. Photo mode. So, why were we allowed to pass this one little signal that got dark? Because we got the verbal order from the dispatcher as a shunting service. Now it probably switched to red again. Now we passed it. Yes, it switched to red again, so that no other train can come in. This is one of the situations where they forgot to put in a proper identification for the signal, I think, and then it shows the default signal ID. Caption. Yes. Let's leave the scenario here. And what I wanted to do is to go to Schnellfahrstrecke Köln. Wait a sec. DLC off. Ist off. Schnellfahrstrecke Köln. And the service will be 10:50. No, what did I? Bon DLC. Here we go. No, here we go. It's not true. Yeah. Okay. Now put them into place. Turn them on. And we should be good. To the trains, choose a route. Schnellfahrstrecke Köln. Timetable, new journeys. And I think the Talent 2 at 10. This one. Just the one that you end up. Anyway. Theodoro says, as shunting service, can we just use the side window to drive backwards instead of changing cab? That is actually a question that I cannot really answer, if that is allowed. To go backwards on a light engine without anyone in the leading cab. I have not researched this properly. As soon as you have cars there, you probably can't do that with anyone doing the securing of the end of the train. But if you're running a light engine, I'm not sure if you can do it, but just looking out of the window, it might actually be allowed, but I cannot give you a definite answer to that. So, Talent 2. Safety systems on over here. Cabin lights, passenger lights, sender, marker lights. That is alright. Wiper PIS. This is one of the trains where you can still activate the PIS on your own. And it is actually working. Isn't it? It is. And now, this is one of the services that have a weird starter signal. Because you see, that we are not getting a green light, but we are getting a red with position light and marker light on the VR signal, with the Ersatzsignal being dark. And still we are supposed to go to Aachen. So we are obviously a train service, not only a shunting service, but we are only allowed to start as a shunting service here. This is one of the oldest bugs in the game. It has mentioned a lot of times, but it is still in it like this. So I assume that we have to start as a shunting service. That means we are limited to 25 in the beginning. At least this prevents us from going beyond the starting program. And again, we would probably have to use the override button, because we're passing a red signal. But the 2000 Hertz magnet was not on. We did not get the Befehl 40 program here. So what the heck? We are in Western Germany now, so you can see this is not an RA12, but let's go into photo mode quickly. But it is an SH1 light signal. And it does not have the mast sign with the two black dots, but with the white, red, white, as we typically have on main signals. So, but since we are in the West, and this is a standalone signal, the SH1 allows us to pass even if we are maybe now a train service. Whereas the other ones showing HP0 have 2 red lamps on, not just 1. Like the ones in the east, in Dresden. Nahverkehr. Quick question. The signal ahead. What signaling system? HV, not KS. Otherwise we would not have these diagonally arranged green over green. Marker light on the top telling us next main signal is closer than the regular braking distance with the green over green aspect. Correct or not correct? It is correct, because in the HV system all the distance signals that are closer to the next have the white light. So assuming that it is actually closer than 950 meters to the next signal, what is typical in station areas, it is correct to show the white light. It does not have a distance signal board, no NE2 board, because it is mounted at the same spot as the main signal, the top one is, with the white, red, white mast sign. But at least now we can go on as a train service. There are specific rules how to switch from a shunting service to a train service or vice versa. Typically, you should stop to do this, to switch from one service to the other. So, you can see the next main signal is here. It actually was closer than 950 meters, obviously. The next one is again supposed to be closer than 950 meters. This is why the additional light was on. The moment we are limited to 16, now we're passing the LF7 for 80. Train has to pass the sign. We actually have 2 trains, we have 8 cars, so 2 train sets. So it will be a bit until we passed. Here's the next main signal, again with a mast sign, and again with a VR signal showing us the next one is closer. So those white additional lights were totally correct, because they are in the HV system with an VR signal. Here's the point where we typically get into LZB. We can go to the 80. Here is the next. What is it? No mast sign, nothing. It is a repeater only. Repeating the clear aspect. And it was a KS repeater. So we switched from the HV system to the KS system. And this is the KS main that was repeated. So you can see, you can, within the sequence, distance signal, repeater, main signal, switch from one signaling system to the other. And it did no longer have a white additional light, what was correct. But what is a bit weird now is that we are approaching the next signal here. We can see from afar, because it has an NE2 distance signal board, that this is a full-blown distance signal. And since it has only one green light, it is a KS system signal, not HV, because a VR signal, distance signal of this kind would have 2 green lights diagonally above each other. This is a KS distance signal showing a steady green KS1, and there should be no white additional light. What we have learned, because KS distance signals with a plain KS1 green aspect should not have additional white lights. We could accelerate to 140 now, but we have to stop at Köln Ehrenfeld. So don't accelerate too happily. And don't mind my driving too much. I won't play this service to the end. Here the repeater does not have an additional light, what is correct, because the KS repeater with the KS1 aspect should not have an additional light on. Now we're getting a main signal at the end of the platform. And what is it here now? What kind of signal is that? It is again KS system, and it is a signal that is a main signal as well as a distance signal. No distance signal board, but you know this downward facing or downward pointing yellow triangle as a mast sign that tells you this main signal is at the same time functioning as a distance signal for the next main signal. That can work in the KS1 system. That is why we have the KS1 system, where one signal is at the same time main signal and distance signal. So for a distance signal closer to 950 meters to the next main signal, we can have a white light, but not with the plain KS1 aspect. So again, this white light should not be there, in my humble opinion. So on our way to Horem, we should actually see a Kennlicht on a main signal. That is the only instance in the game that I remember where we actually have a Kennlicht. We can go 140 here. This yellow one is not for us, by the way. This is for the track to the left. It was a full-blown distance signal, so it can have a white light, and it can have no white light, depending whether it is closer than 950 meters to the next main signal or not. So we can go 250 now, but not with this train. This train is limited to 160. Does it say anywhere? Yeah, here. 160. Not allowed to go faster than that. It's quite fast anyway. Showing. Again, let's go into photo mode to discuss the white light on the next signal, if it is proper or not. What kind of a signal is it? We already see a main signal board, white, red, white, and the yellow triangle. So this is a combined main signal and distance signal in the KS system, and is showing a plain KS1, so there should be no additional light. So now I let the train coast. This one does not have one. And now we're getting closer to what we came for in the first place. You can see it already on the horizon. There is a white light on a signal that does not show anything else. We will get to it too, but in photo mode to look at it in a composed fashion. Yeah. A KS main signal, only a main signal, no downward pointing yellow triangle. From the lamps, you can see it is a main signal also, because it also has a mast sign of that kind, and there is one steady white light on. And that would be the marker light, the Kennlicht, to turn off this signal deliberately. Maybe we only need that one if we have traffic going into those sidings here. And at the moment, we do not need it, so it is switched off. Here it is. Can just ignore it and go on to the next. That was that. Isn't this on S-Bahn München as well? It can be. München-Augsburg is a DLC that I have not played too much. So there can be a signal of that kind as well, and turned off by a marker light. What I want to demonstrate now in Schnellfahrstrecke Kassel Würzburg is nicht Burgsinn, Würzburg. The thing with the Zugdeckungssignal, the train cover signal, the signal that switches between HP0 and Kennlicht. And CD Radar says, I think I saw some white signals there on München S-Bahn. Yeah, maybe that is so. I should play München Augsburg a bit more and dig into this. I thought it was due to the fact that you drive there on the LZB, so the traffic lights are meaningless. This is possible. So under LZB, signals can be turned off for the system, that you can have LZB services and non-LZB services on the same... Oh, I wanted to go into free roam, not spawn on foot. And then the signals are turned off deliberately as well, so they can use a Kennlicht there. Actually, I have not verified if it in the Dunkelschaltung and the LZB they would use the Kennlicht for the Dunkelschaltung. Maybe they do. That is a LZB topic that I cannot answer out of the top of my head now. But if they use the white lights for this, then it has the same effect. The signal is working properly, but it is meaningless. It does not need it now, so you can ignore it. But since you can ignore the signals under LZB anyway, it might not be needed necessarily. So that's why I don't know if they are using it for the Dunkelschaltung. Free roam. I don't want any other trains in here. Otherwise it is getting too complicated. So, where did we spawn? What end of the station are we? Here. And we are in Würzburg, main station. In the middle of the platform, more or less, this is DEF, and in the other end it is going CBA. And here are our, we have free roam, our Zugdeckungssignale. You can see just one red lamp, and if we turn this to go, we don't switch it to two white lights in a diagonal fashion, but only to the one marker light. So let's spawn a train so that we can see how it works. Maybe this one. Niedersachsen ist am Zug. Maybe this does not really belong to Würzburg, but nevertheless. So, at the moment we are sitting here in our train, and the Zugdeckungssignal is telling us we cannot pass. This is an HP0. It is a main signal, even if it is a very small signal. It is a main signal. We cannot pass it. It is showing HP0 red. And if we go into the set path thing, can we actually go there into this direction? Well, it does not really matter how far we go. We can see it was switched to go by the dispatcher, and that means we can go now, but we did not get two white lamps on top of each other, but only one, what is the marker light, and we can ignore the signal now and go on. But it is not an SH1. This is one hell of a trap, that there can be a signal that you are not allowed to pass, you mean? Well, but this is the idea. And why do we do this? Because in this constellation here, if our train was sitting in the segment D to F, for example, and we were approaching from the other end and want to go in and get our passengers in or out, without the Zugdeckungssignal, we would wait for the train to leave and clear the section to be able to go in. With the Zugdeckungssignal, we can actually enter and get our passengers out and you in, and in the meantime the other train can leave. So we get more trains at the platform. Makes sense if you have long platforms and trains that can sit on the platform behind each other. Obviously not with ICEs, they are too long most of the time, but with the S-Bahn trains it works. And then you can have situations where you do not only have one of those Zugdeckungssignale, but a whole set of them, and then you can use them for draw ahead signals. So as soon as the other train is leaving, one of them after the other will be set to Kennlicht marker light, and the other train can approach, even if the platform is not long enough for two trains to sit at it at the same time. Especially when it hangs on roof. Yeah, that is true. You see empty platform and want to stop at the end, but whoops, there is a small red light. So you're speaking from experience. Here, for example, here it hangs from the roof. So if you're coming along your way happily here, going boo doo 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 doo, bap, spat out. Well, you have to stop here in front of the red signal, because it is, as you can see from the mast sign, a full-blown main signal. The next DLC I want to look into... I did not change the caption. Schnellfahrstrecke Kassel Würzburg would have been the correct thing. And... no, the service is... the gaining weight... not gaining weight, gaining mass scenario. Again, that we have played 2 weeks in a row. Oh, I should have gotten them in order before turning them on. But that works. So to the train, create a route Schnellfahrstrecke, and then scenarios gaining mass. That one with the light Taurus. And this is good to have train knowledge, trank knowledge. The Schnarre, no, don't worry. I won't go to the Schnarre and I won't turn on the LZB anyway. I will go just with PZB out of the station. Just like the word. Well, it might actually be the German word for Busse, huh? No? It's just like a Busse. Bzzzt. Die Schnarre. I've never heard this in any other context. But I can't drive without turning on the safety systems. So at least CIFA I need. And the PCB. Where was it again? It was somewhere. Pixel P. Pantograph was here. PCB on. Signal lights, headlights this vehicle only. Front and back. Okay, what do we need to do? Master light on. Did we not just do that? Alright. Set the wipers to 2. Set the train brake to running. Apply some power. And get moving. Are we? No, we're not. Now we are. Sometimes it is weird. So here, oh well, no point, we're already passed. Here we are in the west. So we are getting SH1, not RA12 signals. VR1. No marker light. How fast can I go? 60. We are 2. What is the PD radar says? We have some traps here in Metro as well. For example, main signal in sharp curve, and if there is red, you see it too late. So there is this trick that you look to the track reflection. Oh, that's cool. So you don't get a repeater for this signal then, because that would be the obvious thing to do. Inspector says, I once heard the difference between Schnarre und Hupe is the electrical circuit, AC and DC or something like this. Alright. Maybe. I've never heard that. But that does not mean it is wrong. Well, you do, but that is complicated. HP2 with ZS36. And the next one will be clear. So limit to 60 now until we are out of the Weichenbereich. Again, this is the part where we don't get our 100 around announced. And then in the next part of the track we will encounter this turned off VR signal with the white light that we discussed when we played this a couple of weeks ago. $100. For the switches, a lot of IC trains in the snow. Now it allows us to go 200, but I should have turned on LZB for that. And now, let's see where we are, photo mode. What do we have here? We have a full-blown distance signal. It has an NE2 board. It is a VR type signal. It is dark and it has the marker light on. So this is what we discussed. That's probably incorrect because we should not have Dunkelschaltung. We're not running under LZB. Yeah. But Alistair said, nope, it is a marker light. And this is because here, this signal does not belong for our path, but for the path that is diverging to the right. And he's most probably right with this, as usual. Because we would only need this distance signal if our train was not supposed to go straight ahead here, but to the right here. And to the right, there will be in like a kilometer. I won't do it with a camera because that is long. There will be about 1 kilometer, there will be the corresponding main signal. Here, we pass it, and we're not going to the right, but we're going straight ahead. And then after a while, there will be a main signal to the right. What this distance signal belongs to, if we are actually going to the right. And since we are not, we don't need it, and so it is deliberately switched off. That would be the solution for this. Here we can see it to the right. Thanks again, Alistair, for this comment. I wasn't aware at this point that VR distance signals can use their Zusatzlicht for a marker light, but they can. So here is the main signal that it belongs to. Whereas our main signal is still far ahead, and we will most probably be passing a new distance signal before we even get there. Let's check it out. Where the next main signal or distance signal is. And if the signaling thing makes sense. If it makes sense, we should get a distance signal before we get to a main signal. What did I do now? Interesting. Ah, I did not change the PZB mode. This is why it stopped us. I went beyond the 120 for PZBM. As a light engine, I am allowed to go PZB mode O, but I should have changed it. So now I don't know if I passed a signal. Did I pass a signal in the meantime when I was battling my Zwangsbremsung? I don't think so, did I? Maybe there are no signals anyway because it's only Ersatzsignal territory, but no, there should be signals. Again, we will be getting at Zwangsbremsung when we're going farther even. But you see, the path that we were going, there was no main signal anywhere. So this switched off distance signal was only for going to the right. I can leave the scenario here and go back to the scenario that we played in the beginning. That would be Dresden Nahverkehr or Nahverkehr Dresden again. And the service was the Boogie scenario. Yes, I want to quit, sorry. $150. Like this. And now I hope my save game works. Save game doesn't really work super great with the AFB. So if you want to save, turn off the AFB and turn it on afterwards again. We are on the Vectron again, on our way to Riesa. You can see that the mini HUD now shows us that we have a traction lock, while the train is clearly applying traction. Unfortunately, when they introduced this thingy, they forgot to introduce a button to turn it off. And what we are passing here is one thing that we talked about earlier in the game. This is the only instance in the game where I remember a distance signal has this special kind of distance signal board with the white circle in the middle. So this is not a white light, this is yellow actually. It just looks a bit whitish in front of the purple background. But you remember the HL signaling system typically do not have white lights, and if we want to indicate that this distance signal is closer than 950 meters to the next main signal, we would give them a distance signal board of this kind, and this is the only instance, in the game that I remember a sign of that kind. So there is some stuff left to show you. Of what we've been talking about. Another word, when you're playing this scenario for real and are using the long loco formation and you're turning or you're shunting your locomotive to the other end, don't forget that the 5 vehicles that are set to G are now on the other end of the train. So you have to set them back to P and go to the other end.
Zugbeeinflussung.
For the 5 vehicles that need to be put to G. That is a trap, I think. Otherwise you will have a train that brakes faster at the front and slower at the end. What is obviously not what you want. So now we are approaching a red signal. At least we are getting yellow signals. Here is, for example, one of the repeaters with... what did I do? With this additional sign, the white disc or black circle on the repeater without the distance signal board. So this is the HL repeater, indicating that we are approaching a red signal. So we need to slow down to... Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. But it does not matter. We did not get our speed down fast enough. But this allows us enough time to look at the next signal. Look what we have here. Our red signal with a flashing white bubble. So we are not supposed to stop at this signal here. But this is the Ersatzsignal, the ZS1, the flashing white light. It can obviously appear on an HL main signal. At least here we see one. It is using the lower light of the... doesn't even have two. And this allows us to pass this red signal on Ersatzsignal. Why did we get a Zwangsbremsung? Because we are in PZB mode 70, got the 500 Hz monitoring before we dropped our speed below the 45, I think it is. And so we got a Zwangsbremsung. Allows us to watch the signal properly. Because in photo mode we would not see the flashing, obviously.
AFB. 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 Zugbeeinflussung.
Can't go. Let's see what the problem are. I have to put this to... Let's try it without.
AFB. AFB.
Obviously it takes some time to release the brakes here. Should... in real life we would wait for the whole train to release its brakes. Now I just burn my Vectron against the braking force of my train. Isn't that a nice view? We're getting in a... because we stopped in the 500 Hz monitoring, we are in a restricted 500 Hz, limiting us to 20. So don't forget this. When we're passing the red signal with the Ersatzsignal, also don't forget to use the override button. You never know whether there is an active 2000 Hz magnet with a red signal, it is totally possible that there is one. We will see if we get the Befehl 40 procedure.
Zugbeeinflussung. 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 Zugbeeinflussung.
No, the 500 Hertz just ended. Another thing here what I want to point out is we have a special version of this downward pointing yellow triangle for the eastern part of Germany. It has a black background, but that is the only difference here. Now that we passed, we don't really know because we can't see it flashing in photo mode. Now we are out of the 500 Hertz in a restricted 1000 Hertz, so that we can speed up to 40 actually. And the last thingy that I want to show is when slowly crawling into Riesa is the RA11 and RA11A signals. Here in this case an RA11A because we are in the east, together with the RA12 signal, the orange W. Again, as a recap, it is not relevant for us because we are a train service. Even as a freight train, it can be a train service as well, because we were supposed to go from Nünchritz or wherever it was to Riesa. Strategically placed speedboards behind the mast. And here you can see the RA12 lights shimmering, and they are actually shimmering not in a standalone fashion, but they are shimmering in connection with one of those W signs. See? This is one of those W signs that as a shunting service you would have to stop and ask for permission by the warden or whatever. This is what it is called, Wärter. And in case he allows you to pass as a shunting service, he or she would light up those lights. And they are lit up now. So even as a shunting service, we will be allowed to pass it. As a train service anyway. As a train service we can ignore those W's anyway, even if the lights are not on. And I think further on there will be this other version of the W sign with the white lights placed nicely on top of one arm and underneath it. But we will do this on the fly, and here we can see it. Okay. Train can go wherever it wants. Actually turned off the white lights after we passed. Whatever. Maybe we turned into a shunting service, so we needed the white lights to pass. But this is actually an arrangement for the white lights that is really cute. And I find it great that they made those signals functional now. That was a long stream about the little white lights in the German signaling systems. Zusatzlicht, Kennlicht, Ersatzsignal, and the SH1 and RA12 signals. I thought this will be a quick stream when I started out preparing the presentation, but as you have seen, it took us quite some time to get there. Thank you very much for bearing with me. Next week will be Christmas. I think I will drive a service in the Arosa linie of the Christmas anniversary DLC of last year or the year before. I don't know. You know, I like to play the old stuff and not the new one. So I'm not entirely sure. Maybe I will do this on the first Christmas day, 25th. But you can read the time in the stream info as soon as I know more. If not, then have a nice Christmas and a happy New Year. It would be nice to see you around. Thank you, CD Radar, Spectre, Theodoros, AJ if you're still awake. Thank you, everybody else.
Zwangsbremsung.
Yes, and the train crashed somewhere in the off. Did not manage to get my stream on the ground before that happened. Thank you very much. Bye bye. Have a good time.